Graphics interpretation questions can be pretty straightforward. There may be some calculations involved, but the questions are designed to test your ability to interpret data rather than try to find a new data. As always on the GMAT, your critical thinking skills will come into play here. Here's another scatter plot. First, familiarize yourself with the text that describes the graph. It tells you that each data point represents a state, or the District of Columbia, and that each state is plotted on the graph according to the number of elementary and high schools it contains. Now take a look at the graph to get the big picture. You see that elementary schools are plotted along the x-axis and high schools along the y-axis. In this case, both axes begin at 0, but again the scales of the two axes are different. The axis for elementary schools increases in increments of 500, while the axis for high schools moves up more slowly in increments of 200. Looking at the points with these increments in mind, you can see that the states generally have more elementary schools than high schools. Again, you see a pattern in the graph. The data points in the regression line trend upward. That pattern makes sense since states that have more kids or higher populations are generally going to need more schools of both types. So let's get solving. First, read the sentence. You're looking for some information about the slope of the regression line. Then click on the drop-down menu to take a quick glance at the answer choices. Again, as a Kaplan-trained test taker, you'll see how important it is to look at the answer choices before predicting an answer for graphics interpretation questions. This important step will save you time on test day. You'll notice that your only choices are a slope greater than, equal to, or less than 1. Think about what it means for a line to have a slope of 1. It rises at the same rate that it moves to the right. A line with a slope of 1 usually makes a 45-degree angle with the x and y axes. The line on this graph looks to be about 45 degrees. So does it have a slope of 1? If you said no, you just avoided an important trap in this question. A line with a slope of 1 makes a 45-degree angle with the x and y axes only when the scales of both axes are the same. But here, the scales are not the same. The numbers on the y-axis move upward much more slowly than the numbers on the x-axis. Remember the formula for the slope of a line. The slope is equal to the change in y over the change in x, or to put it in another way, slope equals rise over run. On this graph, the change in y is a lot less than the corresponding change in x. So the slope will be less than 1. Let's look at the next blank. It's asking about high schools, which are measured on the y-axis. You need to estimate the percentage of schools that are below 500 on the y-axis. Rather than counting up all the points below 500, which would be a time-consuming task, count the points above 500, find the percentage that those points represent, and subtract that percentage from 100. In this case, you have about 13 points above 500, representing approximately 25% of the total. Subtracting this percentage from 100% leaves you with 75%, and this is your correct answer. For graphics interpretation questions, get the gist of the graph. Understand the information that's given by the text, then analyze any key or label in the image, such as what the x and the y-axes represented in these two problems. Finally, take a peek at the answer choices before attempting each question by clicking on the drop-down menu. But don't get distracted by them. Just read them quickly so you identify the task at hand. And identifying the task is crucial to this type, and really all types of GMAT questions on test day.